Hi and welcome to my review of the Samsung Gear Fit 2. Before we get started, I just wanted to kind of cover the fact that the Samsung Gear Fit 2 tracks a huge number of activities to the point where it wouldn't be feasible to cover every single one in one review. With that said, to avoid this being a generic paint-by-numbers review that doesn't specifically focus on anything in particular, I'm approaching this as a runner, as a hiker, and a gym goer. I sleep and I walk, and I also drink water and coffee, so I suppose those get a look in too. But look, this is going to be a high-level review, but then focus specifically on those activities and my thoughts around the ability of Samsung Gear Fit 2 to track them. With that said, I hope you enjoy the review. The Gear Fit 2 is a premium fitness tracker priced at around $150. Unlike other products in the Gear lineup, such as the Gear 360 and the Gear VR, the Fit 2 isn't restricted to Samsung smartphone owners and is compatible with all recent Android phones. Fitted with a GPS, heart rate monitor, accelerometer, gyro and barometer, you'll be hard pressed to think of something the Gear Fit 2 doesn't automatically track. The device also lets you manually track things that can't be tracked by sensors, such as the amount of water or, perhaps more worryingly, coffee you drink. My general rule of thumb is that if my fingers are too twitchy to log a cup, then I've had too much. In terms of activities available to track, there are simply too many to mention, but suffice to say, whether you hike, row, practice yoga, run, or wish to record an activity on a machine at the gym, the Gear Fit 2 is aiming to be your #1 fitness companion. The device also aims to encourage sharing your fitness, with Facebook sharing and the option to challenge friends who also have S-Health. Now that we've run through the features, I want to break the review into two parts. The Fit 2, whether on a male or female wrist, looks great. It's light and unobtrusive. While there's no doubt that it does look like a fitness tracker, it's far more subtle than some of the other designs out there. The screen is bright with rich colors, and while the resolution's fairly average, it's only really noticeable when you realize how little of your texts, emails, and social media alerts can fit on screen at one time. On that note, the smartwatch Lite approach is nicely managed. Text messages give you the option to reply with quick auto responses. They're pretty useful, but a lot of my friends did start to wonder why I began replying to them with "Roger that," sounding like a World War I pilot. Music can be exported directly to the Gear Fit 2's onboard storage. However, as we live in an age where MP3s are becoming a thing of the past, this may not be as useful as Samsung hope. I personally stream all of my music through Google Play Music, which usually plays second fiddle to Spotify, so I was pleasantly surprised to see the Gear Fit 2 gave me the ability to skip tracks from the watch with ease. Customization options are a nice touch, with a number of free-to-download watch faces available. As with all of these things, there are also premium watch faces to buy, if that's the kind of thing you want to spend your money on. In terms of activities, the watch really did excel when hiking, far surpassing previous experiences hiking with a running watch. Everything from elevation stats to heart rate tracking, followed by the surprisingly detailed summary page upon completion, really gave the feeling of reward after a particularly taxing hike. Finally, the battery life was absolutely acceptable. If you were to use the device to run or hike, inevitably you'll get less use from it, but even then it's no slouch. For example, during a stint between charges when I didn't use the device to work out once, I wore the watch from 10 PM on Thursday night until 10 AM Sunday morning, so approximately 60 hours. I charged the device for approximately an hour to 100%, and then in the next couple of days, used the Fit 2 to hike for a couple of hours and run for an hour. That time I got 51 hours total use from it. While not remarkable, I never felt cheated when the low battery reminder popped up. Now onto the cons. To begin with, the app itself. S-Health is quite simply cluttered and unintuitive. It feels like the result of dozens of clumsy additions to an aging design that was never built to handle the new features and, in my opinion, feels in dire need of an overhaul. Tracking data such as runs from previous days is just far more fiddly than it should be, and after a few weeks have passed, becomes so inaccessible it just doesn't feel worth searching for. Compare this to Garmin IconX, where I can pull up a 10K time from 3 years ago, or compare my half marathon times by pace in just a few seconds. For something that trumpets data it tracks, it also treats it as extremely disposable. There's also zero web access, with all the data restricted exclusively to the app. If Garmin Connect, Google Fit, and dozens of alternatives offer this, why not S-Health? It just seems ill-conceived as a whole. Occasionally, you'll check the 24-hour activity log to find that the watch claims it wasn't on your wrist for a period of time in which it definitely was. Driving with the Gear Fit 2 is a pain in the ass. When I'm driving, the last thing I need is for my watch screen to flash on every single time I turn the steering wheel because it thinks I'm trying to check the time. Suffice to say, this is far more distracting at night. Now, there must be a way to switch the screen's wrist flick gesture off when the watch detects itself traveling over, let's say, 30 miles an hour. There are so many bloody sensors on the device, it must be able to do that. It's also worth mentioning that Samsung's Tizen OS does have some performance issues at times. There are a few occasions when the watch froze before finally dragging itself back from the brink seconds before it found itself being thrown out the window. Finally, and this is the deal breaker for me, I'm a runner and I've worn Garmin Forerunner watches for years. In 2016, my 6-year-old Forerunner looks extremely dated and at times takes so long to find a GPS signal that I've genuinely considered scaling lampposts to help it out. With only one sensor versus the Gear Fit 2's 5, I'd hoped and assumed that the Gear Fit 2 could comfortably replace the aging Garmin. However, there are a couple of reasons why the Garmin will continue to live on as my primary running watch. To begin with, the Gear Fit 2 times out after a certain period of time. Even if you select Always On, the running stats will time out to a clock display, which means that you'll constantly have to flick your wrist while running just to view your current stats. This wouldn't be so bad, but with a constant motion while running, the device doesn't even acknowledge the wrist has been flicked unless you perform a cartoonish exaggerated movement just to flip the screen on. Not only that, but the Fit 2 provides each piece of data on its own screen, meaning that to find your pace, you'll have to clumsily swipe to the left to bring your stat up, and then clumsily swipe back, trying not to accidentally tap the pause button, something that is remarkably easy to do. Compare this to my Garmin Forerunner that has an always-on screen with no wrist flicking required and provides up to 3 pieces of information on the screen at a time. It knows what runners want to see and when they want to see it. The biggest crime, however, is the degree of inaccuracy with regards to distance covered. I took my Garmin and the Samsung out for a run and after covering 4 miles discovered that the Gear Fit 2 was 0.11 miles behind, which is enough to ruin any training plan. When you're training for weeks to knock a few seconds off your time, every tenth of a mile counts. Ultimately, as a replacement for my Garmin, the Gear Fit 2 just doesn't cut the mustard. Despite the fact that the Garmin has a screen that would look at home in the early 90s and can take a while to locate itself, the data is solid and the experience while running is hassle-free. As someone who's followed a 4-month marathon training plan to the letter and hopes to again sometime in the future, the Gear Fit 2 is just too inaccurate and troublesome to take seriously. As I said before, if you're more casual or simply worry less about obsessively checking your current pace, these issues may well be of no concern to you. Ultimately, the Gear Fit 2 is a fantastic fitness tracker, and that's something that is important to remember. It's a fitness tracker first, and then a smartwatch second. A lot of my issues were related to the fact that it didn't quite stack up to my Garmin Forerunner, which was frustrating because that is an old watch, but it's important to remember that a Forerunner and a lot of other running watches cost upwards of $300, whereas the Gear Fit 2 is $150 and tracks a hell of a lot more data. It may be more of a jack-of-all-trades device, but that's fine. For what it is, it's a fantastic deal. And while I don't need a fitness tracker, and I think that this experience has taught me that, what I would say is that if anyone asked me, would I recommend it? If that's what you're looking for, then absolutely. I hope you enjoyed the review. Thank you for watching.